Yeah?
Whenever you're ready.
Let's do it.
We're all waiting on you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Test. Hi. You all hear me okay? Good. My name's Todd, one of the organizers. You are in San Diego JS, our monthly meeting. Welcome. We're being sponsored tonight by Zito. They've provided this wonderful space and food and drinks. If you want to get on the internet, we have a slight correction. It's not Z Access Guest anymore. It's just Zito. The password there is correct. And if you don't memorize this, it's on the board up there. This is an eye test, so please get your glasses out if you need it. Okay, so in case you had trouble parking, there are Zito reserved spots right across the street if you get here early. If you don't, have fun hiking. All right. If you need to use the facilities, they're against that back wall through the kitchen on the other side. Can't miss it. And this is a professional event, so we do have a code of conduct. It's on our website, sandiegojs.org, and it boils down to be nice, be professional, and we all get along and have a good time. All right. We have 4 organizers here tonight. We have me, Michael, Stuart, Heather. We're all here to answer questions and help you out. And as Heather said, if you want to be more involved as a volunteer, we have a number of ways that you can help us out, including making sounds on the microphone. Okay, so upcoming SDJS events. We have an Ember meetup coming up in July 13th, so please check that out. We have our Full Stack JS talk this month. We'll be covering Loopback. We have your Bring Your Own Project Night on the 19th, and then we have the Node Social Hour on the 21st. If you have questions on what we do at these events, please come talk to us and we'll provide more information. And there's a number of other events going on that are not exactly SDJS related, but I do encourage you to check out meetup.com for more meetups in the area. And we're always looking for speakers, so please, if you have anything remotely interesting that you can talk about within 5 minutes, then please go to this site. We also have these handy dandy iPads for you to sign up and let us know that you're interested. And
related to JavaScript.
Yes, related to JavaScript. Thank you. Yes, so I'm sure all of you can find something to talk about for 5 minutes, but JavaScript related would be important. And we have several talks tonight, lightning talks. Alicia's going to talk about Angular to Angular 2. I'm very interested in that. Varun has registration and credit card payments through Node. We have Michael doing React Universal Rendering. We have James doing Portfolio and Heroku. And then Heather, I'm so sorry. Oh, there you are.
Oh.
I was like,
the title has
I remember
That
Heather.
was the working title.
I changed
That was the working title.
It's now Pieces of
Pieces. Wow, it's very poetic. All right,
Yeah.
Pieces of Ember. Okay, so that's it. That's bright. Okay, so word to our speakers. As the speaker is taking questions, please come up on deck, have things prepped and ready so we can have a nice clip to this thing. I'm going to be providing the timing, so at 4 minutes, I'm going to signal the audience to do a little golf clap. Let's everyone practice. I know you can do it. And then at 5 minutes, we're going to start clapping, and that's when you need to leave.
Wait, 5 minutes go like this.
5 minutes, we're all done, we clap.
You guys. This is what happens when I let you make the announcement.
Well,
Yeah, it's
you
like
know,
complicated.
that's all right.
Okay.
We're going to do a rolling deploy
This
of
is-
speakers. So the speaker that's on deck is going to answer questions while the speaker that's up next is getting...
But
Yes.
the signals are all wrong. Okay.
Yeah, the signal is one hand.
One
golf
hand,
clap.
golf clap.
I like to
that means
demonstrate.
there's 1 minute left.
Right, but they don't know what the
speaker's
signal
gonna
is.
be
You
like,
just
One,
stand
two,
Speed up
do.
now.
All right.
And
All
then
right,
two.
let's practice because we are way out of sync.
Michael,
Yeah.
All right.
do it.
All right. So one hand, golf clap. Good. 2 hands, big clap.
getting there.
I think they got it.
We're getting there.
I think they got
We're
it.
getting there.
Are we
Okay.
gonna cap question time, or are we just gonna?
Let's try and cap it to like 3 or 4 questions, and then after 3 or 4 questions, you'll unplug, and that person will be able to hang out afterwards and
Yes.
answer more questions. So
3 or 4 questions. Be considerate of the time constraints. If you're having something that should be an offline conversation later, or I will scream banana.
That is a new one.
That's
The
I
banana
just
one.
made that up
Okay.
Because it's happened before.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready.
if you're ready.
All right.
So up first is
Alicia. Ready? All right. So you can get yourself.
Okay. Can I hook up my machine?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, time.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alicia Guerra. I am a JavaScript developer here in the San Diego area. I'm going to be giving a talk today called AngularJS to Angular 2. And what I'm going to be covering is what's new in Angular 2, what's new with TypeScript, and how to facilitate a migration over from Angular 1 to Angular 2. So the audience that I'm directing this towards has at least a passing familiarity with JavaScript and AngularJS. It would also help if you were familiar with ES6 and class-based object-oriented programming. But if not, that's perfectly fine. No matter what your background is, I'm sure you'll get something out of this today. So, all right, what is Angular 2? It is a development platform for building mobile and desktop web applications. It's not a version update of Angular 1, but it's a complete and total rewrite. It was moved into beta in December of 2015, and the first release candidate was barely published on May 2016, which was 2 months ago. So we're looking at cutting edge technology here. So what's new in Angular 2? There's a lot of things, but I'm going to go over the main points. So mobile development, you can build native mobile apps with strategies from the Ionic framework, Native Script, and React Native. Desktop development tends to be easier when mobile performance issues are handled first. It's modern because Angular 2 targets ES6 and modern browsers, and this reduces the need for browser compatibility workarounds. It's component-based. In Angular 1, we used directives, controllers, and scope. And in Angular 2, we use components are the main way that we build and specify logic on the page. We're using TypeScript. You don't need to use TypeScript to use Angular 2, but it's highly recommended, so I am going to spend some time talking about it. There's also improved dependency injection. This model allows for more component object-based work, and the bindings make it possible for dependencies to be named. There's also dynamic loading, which lets developers add new directives or controllers on the fly. There's asynchronous template compilation, and then diary.js logging. Diary.js is a logging service that measures where time is spent to be able to identify bottlenecks. So, TypeScript. It's a free and open source programming language. It was developed and maintained. It's developed and maintained by Microsoft. It's a strict superset of JavaScript. It's a strict superset of ES6. It was first made public in October of 2012, but it wasn't made available on IDEs other than Visual Studio until 2013 when I think a plugin was released for Eclipse. And it's currently available on Eclipse, NetBeans, IntelliJ, Sublime Text, WebStorm, all these modern IDEs. So TypeScript is different than traditional JavaScript. The reason it's called TypeScript in the first place is because it supports static typing with optional type annotations. There are also declaration files which have the file extension .d.ts, and this kind of concept, it's analogous to header files in C, C++. There's classes. If you guys are familiar with ES6, it has classes, and because traditional JavaScript, it tends to be a classless language because the focus is on functions and prototype-based inheritance. But here we have classes. We can use inheritance to extend those classes. There's public, private, and protected modifiers. There's a static keyword. There's abstract classes, and there's constructor functions. So if you're more comfortable with class-based, object-oriented programming, like if you're coming from maybe a C# or Java background, you might like this. You might like this language a lot better. There's also generics. And namespaces and tuples, where you have arrays and it can be different types. So to map Angular 1 over to Angular 2, controllers and component directives map to components, services map to services, decorator directives map to directives, and filters map to pipes. Alrighty, so this is a plan to migrate over. I got it from Joe Eames, which is an Angular, which is a Google developer. There's a style guide on GitHub written by John Papa for Angular, and it's best to upgrade to the latest version of Angular 1, which I think is 1.5.7. And it's best to do new development with components, and to start using ES6 and ES6 classes. Alrighty then. So that about wraps it up. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to give this talk. That's if you have any questions, feel free to catch me after this talk and I'll answer them one-on-one. My contact info's up here if you want to shoot me an email if you have specific questions. Thanks. There's none of that in Angular 2. There's no scopes or controllers.
So that's just that you write that all inside of the component now?
Right.
Instead of passing it.
Yeah, there's no scopes or controllers in Angular 2.
Okay.
Or it's right.
Yeah, okay, that was.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How is
Well, it has it enables native mobile development, and you can use the Ionic framework. You can use NativeScript, and you can use React Native to develop on mobile.
Hi, I'm Varun. I go to Scripps Ranch High School, and I'll be a 10th grader next year. So I'll be talking to you about registration and credit card payments with Angular and Node.js. So some of the challenges we had in this program was collection of student information. With 100 plus students a year was very complicated. It was all on paper, and there's just a lot of paper to manage and easy to lose. It was difficult to track student payments for Olympiad expenses, so it ran short of funds very often. And allocation of events to students was cumbersome because each student needs 2 or 3 events, and there's 23 events. So my solution was a online form, and it ensured all students paid on time upon registration, and we collected $9,000. Event allocation was completed much faster as it was all done on the computer, and organized email lists were easily created with the collected information. So one of the organizers, David Juris, said the registration form was a tremendous time saving for the organization. So I'll give a demo. So this is what the page looked like. So this is the student information, the parent information, and then this is the event selection. So this one is drag and drop. So let's say I wanted to pick experimental design and green generation and invasive species. But this is all in order, so I could put the green generation up on top and so on. And if I did not like these selections, I could reset it and completely restart. And finally, there is the payment. So this is the payment here, and then you can add extra. And as you can see, it changes on the button on the bottom right here. And so this is what the Stripe checkout looks like for collecting payment. So I'll just enter a dummy credit card information. And then we get to a confirmation page. And then it also sends an email. It's pretty nice. So this is what the email looks like. So it's a good receipt for the payment. So some of the technologies I used were Express.js for the server, Mongoose, MongoDB for the database, SendGrid for sending email confirmations, and Stripe for credit card payment. And then on the client, I use AngularJS, Angular 1, with Stripe checkout, which is right here, and the drag and drop. So the drag and drop library was really simple. It's a nice library I found for the user, the UI. So in the controller, we put a watch just to see what's going on, and so we're always alerted to what's being changed. And then in the HTML, it's pretty simple. So the DND draggable means what's able to be dragged. If it's moved, it moves to the next list. And then you can also disable it if there are too many events. So in our demo here, we had 4. So if I tried to move another one after 4, it wouldn't have allowed me to move it. And then there is the selected. If you select it, it highlights yellow. And of course the class, and then the name of the event. So I also created a different app for my school music program that included payment, email confirmations, authentication, and I didn't spend a single dime. So I would love to give a presentation on how to create a completely startup app with everything, including a database and payment, without spending any money. And I'm also a high school student, so in between all my homework, I would love any opportunity for internships at your companies. Thank you. Well, it was all there, so I just had to include what they gave me, and then everything was given to me by Angular.
What do you think?
I think it was just learning the language because this was my first thing, so just figuring out how to use everything. Yeah, and putting it on a form and stuff.
Sweet. So my name is Mike Roberts, and again, I'm one of the organizers. I also happen to work here at Zito, so I'm a full stack software developer. I also run one of the other meetups that we do here, the full stack. So I'm going to do a talk that kind of focuses on how to incorporate full stack JavaScript in rendering React components on the server side. So what's the deal with rendering React on the server? What's the goodness behind that? Well, number one, you're going to be able to render HTML directly when there's a request made to the page. And this is really good for search engine optimization. So if you're serving content to Google, Google wants to have an idea. It doesn't like lazy loading content. So you pay a little bit of a penalty by rendering React on the client side and rendering your entire user interface on the client side only. So it's really good to be able to push a full rendered HTML DOM to the page for search engines. Next, you're going to get to reuse a lot of your code. So there's a good chance that you're going to have some code on your server side that you're going to be able to just kind of hydrate and use on the client side. Things will often appear faster to the end user. So because the server's pretty powerful, it can render the page pretty quickly. It'll probably do a better job than some of the older devices. So you'll be able to get a better, less jank, less flutter in your pages it loads for the end user. You're going to have older browsers and devices that you're going to be able to take advantage of fallbacks for when JavaScript's not available. And that's right, you can actually render HTML, you can handle a form and a submission without any JavaScript being run in the browser at all. So if they disable the JavaScript, or for some reason they have an ad blocker or something, you can still kind of get around that by rendering things to the browser already as a HTML template and not have any interference on non-JavaScript compatible devices. The drawback to it, the big con, is it does add quite a bit of complexity. And I think the biggest fear for people that haven't done universal rendering is just the fear of unknown. So the documentation for React, how many of you guys have been in the documentation for React? Not an excellent example of documentation, right? They just tend to have a style that they use around things that could be code, could be an example, could just be kind of metadata about what Facebook thinks you should do. It doesn't follow a very good presentation, so can be kind of hard to figure your way through this on your own. So I'll kind of walk you through the real basics. What do you need to do differently? So first off, you may have ES6. So if you're writing ES6 components, you're going to need to make sure that you've wired up things on your front end for ES6, right? So you're going to need to Babelify your code. That might mean you have to change out some of your pipelines. So if you're using other things like Istanbul, or you're using any of the other parts of your pipeline, they may need to have that transpilation going on. In addition to that, you may need to change your components to make them more lifecycle friendly for rendering on the server side. Because if you think about it, the server side is never going to actually render things to the DOM. So it'll never mount to the DOM. So you don't want to use lifecycle events like component will mount, right? Or component did mount, because it'll never mount. Now, the component might be willing to mount, so that might be the better lifecycle event for you to kind of latch onto and make sure you're firing off events based on that. And then obviously you need to have some kind of special method to sort of simulate the DOM and get your component to actually mount itself onto some portion of the DOM itself. So the first thing that you're going to do differently is you're going to use React Create Factory. And so this method is going to basically do the transpilation on the fly for you to take your JSX and transpile it into an actual like breathing JS component. So you don't have to do any kind of like transpilation ahead of time. That's all kind of baked into using the Create Factory. So we should all be using JSX. How many of you guys build a component without JSX? Not many, right? So you're then going to use render to string to take the compiled component and render that into HTML so that you can then push that through your template. So this is what it looks like on the client side. You're going to have your JSX. You're going to render out your component. So this is a really basic component with one subcomponent. And on the server, you're basically going to go through those steps I mentioned. You're going to require in your JSX. You're going to use your factory. You're then going to mount it to a string and then serve that out using whatever your render method is. If it's EJS, if it's Marco, at the end of the day, that's what's going to get you there. So things to remember: use will mount for setup stuff, create factory to actually get it into a rendered, like breathable component, and then render that to a string and push it out. So that's your response. Resources, React Docs, not great, but it'll get you further than what I've just done here. Questions? So it's entirely possible.
Do you have any, is there any overlap in terms of ability to the components you're actually, layout that's doing the server-side rendering, but it's still using compositional components that you front end?
Sure.
How do you find your
No, you're going to use exactly the same component. You just need to make sure that you kind of shape it to make sure you're using the right lifecycle events. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're having to hydrate some portion of state, so that gets a little bit more complicated. But in the end, no, you're taking the same component, so I'll put it in like a universal folder instead of a client-side folder, and I'll render it from the server from that same folder that I would then pull it in and build it from and bundle it together for the JavaScript that you're going to bundle and ship.
Are you using React Router, or what's
We
the
don't
router?
we don't use a single page app in our flow, so we have to make a page request for every individual page. So we don't have a need right now for React Router. So for us, routing takes place in the server. But
So
if you're
you
doing
have to match up a server-side route for every The back end is
Yeah,
what?
so-
Express or something?
At Zito, we do registration marketing, and I'd be more than happy to get into this later for those of you that like want to learn more about what we do. But basically, we have like a static 5 or 6 pages. So we know when they finish going to the splash page, you're going to go to a sign-up page. When they finish at the sign-up page, you're going to go to a survey after the survey. So we know that that's the direction they're going to go in. And unlike having to build a full-featured app or single-page app where they could go all over the place and click on a bunch of things, there's a specific flow. So we have the good fortune of not having to use like the router. We know when they finish with this page, we know where they're going to next. So it's a little bit different of a use case than what most people might be doing with the standard application. I don't want to monopolize too much time, so Egghead has got really good videos, and they were able to snag the guy that wrote Redux. So he's written 2 courses for them. One like a primer on Redux, and then a second layer that goes through it. He does an awesome job of breaking down what Redux actually does, and I think that's super helpful because it also helps shape the rest of like how I view React.
Yeah.
And even though we don't use Redux, it really helps to kind of see how they compose components and how he thinks about dumb components and stateless components and like the pure functions, things like that. Egghead's really good. Front-end Masters has a course where they cover running on the server side, so that would be another resource. Both of them.
Cool. That was awesome. Hi, I'm James. I'm going to be giving a talk about Heroku and your portfolio, or your portfolio on Heroku. I don't remember which way it was wrote. Either way, if you're a front-end developer, you're just starting out, then you're looking to get a job, right? Well, a lot of artists, a lot of other people in different disciplines, they have a way for you to come look at their work, right? Now, us as programmers, we use a lot of like GitHub to host our projects, and that's really important. But another important tool, and there are other tools that are similar to this, and I just chose Heroku because it's happened to be the one I use, is Heroku. Let's say you're working on a project and you want to have it on your resume, right? This is a great use case. This is a great reason to try what I'm about to show you how to do. And this is also very particular to front-end development. If you're using like a framework like Ember, React, Angular, maybe Meteor, this would be a great use case and a great way for you to get your projects out there. So what I usually do is I'd have my resume, and then I'd have my GitHub URL, and then I'd have a URL for my projects that someone can go and look at. All right. So Heroku is a hosting platform. It allows you to put your projects up online, and it does a lot of easy stuff for you. If you're a front-end developer, you don't want to think about back-end stuff. You don't want to think about how to maintain a server. You should really just be focused on producing your product, and then maybe elaborating on the UI, UX, the color, the design, all that stuff, because that's what a front-end developer does, right? Now, maybe you have differing, you don't agree with me, but we can talk about that later. Okay, so I've got a project here that I've just recently finished, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to get it set up and onto Heroku. So on the left over here, we have the Heroku website. All you have to do is register. It's free. The big thing about this is it's free. Until a point, though. If your app gains a lot of popularity, starts getting used, then it will eventually cost you something. I don't know what. It hasn't happened to me yet. Yeah, that tells you something about my success. Okay, so I'm going to move in over here really quick. Okay, so Heroku has a command line interface. So we're in my project directory right now. This is kind of weird. Okay, so Heroku help. I've already installed the command line tool. You can use brew install Heroku, and it will install it for you. If you have a Linux, it's something different. This is a Mac. All right, so it's just like adding a GitHub repository. So you would go git remote, and you can see I have Heroku and Origin, which is my GitHub hosting repository. And you literally just push your code to Heroku, and boom, it's on there. So I could do like this, Heroku, or actually git push Heroku. And if it works, okay, everything's up to date, already pushed. It would show you a progress bar, all that stuff, depending on the size of your project. And then you can also, so let's say that I didn't set up my project originally, right? I'm creating a brand new Heroku project. I'm not going to show up to because it would take a little bit more time, but you could create that. It would give you a generated name. But more importantly, over here in the console, it would create it for you. The console is really important. Remember I mentioned it's really easy to use? Okay, so Heroku gives me a git URL here, and it also gives me what's really important, a domain. So I don't have to think about, I don't have to go buy this. This is provided. So I call it searchy GitHub Heroku.app, right? And now it's online. I can take that URL, I can put that on my resume, and boom, someone can go look at my project. And I could, the goal is to have a few projects up there. So like if we went to it right now, it looks like crap. So who's got a quick, really short GitHub name? I'm going to go with Ycats, the guy I followed this tutorial from. So as you can see, it works. It connects to GitHub. It's really simple. So if you're using depending on the framework you're using though, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm using Ember.js for this project, and I have to use a build pack for Ember. Each framework's going to have a slightly different way of doing this, and the other big part of this is my project doesn't connect to a backend. It's using an API. So you want to think about your project if you're you want to think about what your project's going to be. If it's going to connect to a backend API, maybe you can also do that, but I tend to keep things modular and in the front. So I'm connecting to a simple GitHub API. You could connect to Reddit. You could connect to whatever and do the same thing. And that's it. Under 4 minutes. Any questions? Go ahead.
Can you explain that is that it's a zip? Like
This? The build pack?
yeah.
I honestly don't actually know. It's magic. I Googled I had a lot of problems when I was first putting it up, and then I eventually Googled like Heroku, Ember, and the build packs came up, and I did a little research. Really, it's a...
Right, but when I make a request to,
It's a server.
is that what it is? Okay.
Pretty sure it's in Yeah.
So each build pack has additional resources that the Heroku can use to provision the actual instance it's going to use to run your application. So it might be like if you're using like mean stack or something, you might need MongoDB or some other resources.
Right.
So you can actually have build packs that will do all the other, like it goes out, runs a bash script, provisions everything else, and then
Gotcha.
so you can write your own build packs for Heroku, and it will provision resources. And
I'm a total noob. Why
If
isn't
you're a
this?
front-end developer just starting out, it's a great
Why
thing
isn't
to
this
think
showing
about
up on my
if you have
laptop
projects that you
right
want to
Yeah, dude,
show to a
screens.
potential employer.
What?
It's a
What are you
great,
trying to
great
do?
simple ways, easy way for them to see it all.
I just had a question.
Sure.
If
Screens?
Or I didn't have time to throw it up on Heroku for my prototype, and then when we're scaling, it's doing really well, I would transition to a backend in AWS, or Heroku takes care of a lot of things for you. It's a lot easier to use, but I would eventually move to AWS or Rackspace, something like that. There you go.
well, right. But also understand it will go to sleep on its own if it doesn't get enough like activity. So if things aren't hitting the server, it'll go to sleep. So what you could also do, and a lot of developers are sharp enough to figure out that you can make multiple apps.
Oh no.
So just make one app, ping it every once in a while, and it'll keep it alive. So within the last 6 months or so, they instituted it has to go to sleep for a certain amount of the time for it to stay on the free tier. Otherwise, they'll push you onto like a paid tier. And the idea is it's a premium service. It's a platform as a service. No, you don't have shell access,
No.
but you can designate workers, and then, like I said, you can spin the workers up at certain times and stuff. If anybody has any other questions, you can. Or Heather.
I think a lot of people have used.
Let's do this.
All right, so you've all probably heard about Ember, and you've probably heard that it's an ambitious framework, and it enables us as developers to be more productive so that we can get to the fun parts of building an application. But a lot of developers, not a lot, but some developers might not want to buy into the entire Ember ecosystem. They might feel it's overkill for the project at hand. But what they don't know is that a lot of the awesome power that makes Ember what it is actually available in micro libraries. So you can use them outside of the Ember ecosystem. So tonight I'm here to tell you a story called Pieces of Ember. And I realized after I did this slide that not everyone might have seen Pieces of April, which is an indie flick, which is what this movie poster is. So the humor might be lost, but it's a good movie. Go watch it. And so I'm Heather Breiswitz. I'm currently rebranding as Heather Bryce because it's easier to say. I go by Caligoanimus most of the place on the internet and H. Breiswitz everywhere else, and I now work at Dockyard, which is an awesome consultancy. So, what kind of building blocks come with Ember? First, we've got RSVP. We've got router and route recognizer. We get handlebars and HTML bars. Then we get Glimmer. Some of these might sound familiar to you. RSVP is a tiny implementation of the promises spec. And it's pretty simple to get going. It should look a lot like all the other promise libraries that you've been using up until now. I've used it on my own in Node apps for Node workers. It's my promise library of choice. Then we've got router and route recognizer, and here's some example code. You can go get some more by checking out their GitHub repos, but basically router is built on top of route recognizer, and router is just a more comprehensive routing system, while route recognizer is a bit more metal, so it doesn't give you a lot of the fluff. Then we've got handlebars and HTML bars. You might recognize the handlebars logo. These are JS templating libraries. HTML bars is built on top of handlebars, and what it does is it builds DOM rather than building strings, because string interpolation is slow. And then we've got Glimmer. Or should I say Glimmer. Glimmer is the low-level renderer that builds live DOM from handlebars templates, so it's also built on top of handlebars. It is essentially the React of the Ember world. So React, most people don't know this. They think it's a framework. It's not a framework by itself. It's just a view layer. So Glimmer is that for the Ember world. Some devs, Glimmer 2 is also in work right now, and it's written in TypeScript. And we're going to get huge performance boosts once we finally switch over to Glimmer 2. Right now, React is still faster than Glimmer 1. But Glimmer 2 is going to blow React out of the water as far as FPS goes. So, disclaimer, Glimmer, even though I listed it as a standalone library, is not yet a standalone library, but it's coming soon. Tom Dale, who's one of the Ember creators, has gotten it working for a standalone experiment project that he presented on a few weeks ago at Wicked Good Ember in Boston, which is a conference. He works at Monograph, and he created an app with Ember CLI, Sass, TypeScript, app cache, and Glimmer 2. So the app and Glimmer all compressed down to 40 kilobytes, which is smaller than the React library all by itself. So this is awesome news for mobile app development. The app was hillary.monograph.com, so you can go and check it out and see the speed performance for yourself. Making Glimmer available as a standalone library is going to open up one of the most powerful parts of the Ember ecosystem to be used on its own as a standalone. So this is going to help us service apps that Ember does not necessarily target currently, for which Ember might currently be overkill. So you'll get all of the wonderful work that the Ember team's been putting into Glimmer outside of Ember. It's fast. So to wrap up, the pieces that you get, you can have promises, you can have a router, you can get templating and templating with virtual DOM, all from the Ember core team outside of Ember. I work at Dockyard. We're an Ember, Elixir, and Phoenix consultancy company. We just opened in San Diego. We want to work with you on your next project. We run Wicked Good Ember in Boston, and we're going to be running So Ember, which is an Ember conference we're going to be holding in January next year in San Diego. And here's my info again. Thank you. If you want to hear more, come to the Ember meetup next Wednesday. I'm giving a talk there on change set and change set validations. Any questions? No questions. Okay, go ahead.
If you had a component, pull that into.
If you're using an Ember component, there's currently no way to use it outside of the full Ember framework ecosystem. That would be, dream world, right? Like, I think everyone would love to just have a component marketplace where we could share components across frameworks, but that doesn't exist. I think everyone's currently working on that.
So I've always been clear, is like the whole Ember, is that prime time?
So Glimmer is not related to server-side rendering.
Okay.
So the server-side rendering in Ember that's available is called Fastboot. So that's completely different. Glimmer is the view layer. It actually renders out the DOM.
But it doesn't need that in order to. It doesn't render the DOM and you get a string, or just the fast boot actually renders out.
It actually creates DOM elements
Okay.
and uses them for rendering. So it's like handlebars. Fast boot is going to be what actually runs on your server and generates the static so that you can deliver it immediately. So it's a little bit different. Oh, a lot of it different. Also gives you speed. Spec compliant to ES6. Uh-huh.
Implementation the same?
It
Is it apply code to
matches.
that? Okay.
It matches the promises A. And ES6 does support it with some Babel plugins, but it's not like supported yet. And you can use it outside of ES6. Okay, thanks everyone.